Yeah, my uncle. He looks at you, I guess the only way to describe it would be spooky. It's like he's seeing other things that the rest of us don't see. He's a Vietnam vet, and he talks about being in Nam all the time. And you have to be careful not to surprise him, because he can kind of freak out. It's sad. He can't even sleep anymore. He says every time he closes his eyes, he sees piles of dead bodies. I don't understand it. It's been years since the war ended. I just don't get it.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is a severe psychological and emotional reaction that results from exposure to profoundly stressful situations. PTSD can result from exposure to situations such as assault, rape, natural disasters, and war. The symptoms must last at least a month and often last for much longer. For example, it is estimated that roughly 15% of Vietnam veterans still suffered from PTSD 15 or more years after the war. In the following interview, Carl, a 46-year-old veteran, describes some of his combat experiences in Vietnam. Carl volunteered for the Army when he was 17 years old and served as a door gunner in a search and destroy helicopter.
The one guy was real vivid because he looked right straight up, and he's shoveling rice into his mouth, and all of a sudden his eyes come up, and you're making contact as you're squeezing the trigger, and just chaos. They're trying to get their weapons up, but it's already too late. I mean, I'm prepared with an M60 at that range, and you're probably 80, 100 feet above them is all shooting down through the jungle, but it's not that hard to hit what you're aiming at. An M60 is putting out a fair amount of ammo per second, and so it just exploded. I can't say that I saw the rounds hit, but I saw people dropping and falling, and the guy that was standing back here, he started to move away, and I'm spraying the whole area. And when we came back over and rolled back in to take a look, we didn't get any fire. And so then we had, which meant that either they had left or they were dead. So Cobra came in and the attack helicopter and put some rockets on it, and then we called up the air rifle platoon and come in, and we had 5 dead with their weapons, and found their boats in the river and destroyed those and packed up their crap, and a good morning, a great morning. It worked. It worked great with nobody getting hurt. It felt exhilarating. It felt just fucking crazy. Just, like I said, I get goosebumps when I think about it. It worked absolutely perfect, and nobody got hurt.
When Carl returned to the United States, he felt alienated from the people around him. Few people could understand the traumas he had experienced. His feelings of isolation, anger, and pain contributed to the development of his symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Coming back from Vietnam as a single person, I flew back with a group of guys, got off the airplane and went home, but I wasn't with anybody in my unit. I was by myself. I went back home. There wasn't anybody else in town at the time that had been in Vietnam that I knew about. Eventually I did find out there were some, not a great deal in Port Angeles, Washington, but there were some. If anybody asks you anything, they want to know how many people you killed. They want to know that side of it. They don't want to talk about what it's really like or what it was like for you. They just want to talk about the gore and stuff. So what I figured out when I came back on my second leave, I had some pictures that I took, a napalm body, and a picture was holding a head with blood running down my arms. And when people would ask me, I'd give them these pictures to look at, and then they'd shut up and go away. Saw a bunch of people I went to school with, things like that. They're still hanging out at the Arctic Circle, wherever, getting hamburgers, and I realized they were kids, and I wasn't a kid anymore. And I'd never be able to see the world the way they did. And that's, you know, I really felt like I was really different and maybe dirty. Yeah. And it's one of the biggest losses, I think, is that innocence. Because you, you end up walking a different path in life and you can never come back. I can never have that innocence, feeling free to be happy and enjoy life as a child, without all the horrific pieces and understanding what life is really about, or with death and destruction and all that. And that's a lot to lose. As you think back to when I think about what all the kids did that I went to school with, and you get really jealous. Yeah. And then angry, because no one cared. That's probably the hardest part about Vietnam afterwards, that people didn't care.
In the following sequences, Carl describes many of the symptoms that are typical of people with post-traumatic stress disorder, including hypervigilance, flashbacks, startle responses, and intrusive thoughts. He also describes some of the strategies that help him to cope with his disorder.
I went back to school after I started PTSD treatment and back into college, and when it started out, I always sat in the far left classroom over by the window, at the very back of the room, by the window. Not by the door, because that's where someone would come in. And I knew all the bushes down here. I knew where there was any possibility. I scanned those bushes every time when I would sit down. I knew which guy around me to take out first if anything happened, in the order I would take them out. I knew what to do if someone popped the door and flopped a grenade in. I had a flashback when I was bowling. And I kept bowling, but I kept seeing this paddy dike, the corner of a paddy dike, and there's trees, rubber trees just beyond it. There's an infantry squad pinned down. There's gooks on the other side of in the trees. They're shooting, and we're in a helicopter trying to provide fire, but we can't get an angle where we can shoot and protect them from where it's at. I actually wrote that one out. I kept writing it, and I kept seeing it, and I could hear the shots. I could smell it. I could smell the gunpowder and stuff, and it was just, When I get startled, I get angry immediately. I've yelled at the kids, I've got startled and grabbed a knife. I won't sleep with a gun close to me, because first thing I'm going to do if I get startled, get awoken too quick, is grab a gun. You know, wife learns that she walks to the door and says your name, she doesn't come shake you or grab you, because to wake you that way is, you're going to get hit. If you just any type of startle like that. And it bothers me that startle. I was in a meeting here a couple years ago with other professionals, and a window dropped and slammed on the case behind me, and I threw a cup of coffee and was under the table with my peers, and I just, oh, what the fuck is this? And I was just so angry. I had a nightmare or intrusive thoughts for a number of years, a pile of bodies that follows me around, mostly skeletal, kind of like the skeleton on the board there, the skull, you see in the eyes, and just this huge, overwhelming pile of bodies that you don't know anybody, it's just... If my sleep starts getting off and I start sleeping less, I know that there's something stressful going on that I need to deal with, because the one thing I know about PTSD, it's a stress-related disorder. If I can manage the stress in my life, symptoms stay down. So I monitor my sleep. And the next one for me is the hypervigilance. And if it gets to that point and I'm starting to look and pay more attention to things and get anxious about things when I'm around too many people, I know there's something stressful going on. And the third one in line for me is the startle response. And so I kind of watch those symptoms. And each person has those ones that are really personal, that fit them so well.
Carl profoundly regrets the loss of his innocence that occurred during his years of combat. As a Native American, however, he takes consolation in tribal beliefs about the essential role of the warrior in guaranteeing the survival of his people.
Lakota think that the women and the children are the most important, and that's why the warrior walks at the front, because he's expendable, and that's okay, because you're defending and keeping that alive, to keep it going, and that's a good concept. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you don't take care of the women and children, you don't have the ability to go on, and that really helps to have something like that to look for, and to look at, and to be a part of. So it's okay for me to have sacrificed and to do that, because it helped keep that going, and someone has to do it, someone has to be willing.